Yeah, hey everyone. So Matt Hartman here, and today I will be talking about end user authentication and authorization as a part of your agentic development. So with that, first things first is, well, what is end user auth N and auth Z? So think of scenarios when you're building your ADK agents where you don't want a hard-coded set of credentials to consume your underlying service. So for this example and demonstration, we'll be covering Salesforce. There could be scenarios, like I mentioned before, where you don't want those hard-coded creds utilized as a part of your underlying queries, actions, entities, and kind of whatnot within the agentic ecosystem. So what this supports behind the scenes is something along the lines of what we call federated search. So what federated search is you're actually searching the underlying data source with the end user credentials presented as a part of your agentic ecosystem. So we'll demonstrate that and show all the parts behind the hood and behind the scenes that power a lot of this development and orchestration workflow. So first things first, like I mentioned before, I have my Salesforce agent here. So if I just say hello, and again, we'll get into all the different parts in a second. So as you can see, hi, I'm a Salesforce search agent that can look up Salesforce information given your permissions. How can I help you today? So I'll say, I would like to look up 2 accounts that I have access to. And guess what? What's going to happen is it's going to prompt me to sign in. Sure, to start, I will sign you in. So I'll say, yes, sign me in. And what it's going to do is it's going to force me, as you can see, to sign into my end user service. So it's going to use my credentials and my identity to grab this information. So like I said before, I'll sign in. So I'm just going to grab my credentials right now. Give me 1 second. So here's my username. And again, this can orchestrate to any sort of end user auth. So we've seen examples with ServiceNow. This example is just Salesforce specific. And again, we'll talk through the different parts and facets as a part of that. So first things first, let's sign in here. I think there might be an MFA requirement as well. We'll see. Oh, we should be good to go. So please authorize me. Now that you're authorized, what you'll see is once those creds are propagated to the ADK, which should take a second, it's going to give me the list of 2 accounts. So there you go. It's able to list the tools now, and these are the accounts that I have access to. The first part of this underlying setup is an integration connector. So, okay, how within my ADK framework can I connect to my underlying source system? So for this scenario, Salesforce. With that, like I mentioned before, we're going to be using application integrations integration connector portfolio, which encompasses about 150 plus first and third party native connectors. So think anything Google Cloud, multi-cloud, SaaS native, hybrid, on-premise connectivity. As long as there's a networking route to the underlying service, we should be able to connect to it. So with that, like I mentioned before, let me go to my Google Cloud Console and type in integration connectors. So if I go to my connections available, again, this was already pre-created. So if I go to SFDC, as you'll see in a second, once this loads, I have my agent space dynamic connector that I set up. So like I mentioned before, this is going to be like any other connector you would set up as a part of the application integration portfolio. So drag and drop functionality where I put a key and a secret and I connect. The major difference here and the way it's able to override those credentials is because I enabled the enable authentication override endpoint. So I checked that button there. And as you can see, what this supports is dynamic identity propagation. So whether it's in an application integration process or the underlying connector as a part of your ADK development, both would be supported. Like we mentioned before, now we'll dive into the hood a bit from an ADK perspective and talk about anything and everything I'm doing from the underlying code to support that end user auth. So first things first, here's my agent.py file. So pretty self-explanatory agent if you've developed an agent using the ADK previously. I have my model, the name of the service, the description, the instructions, and the tools that I want to utilize to add my enterprise truths to the underlying agentic ecosystem. So if I navigate to my tool here, this SFDC connector tool, as you can see, It's a pretty similar agent and agent tool to anything you may have seen before. So here's the tool set that I'm utilizing. So the application integration tool set to be able to call into an application integration process or connector with the pertinent project details and the querying and actions that I'd want as a part of that. So count, case, and contact lookup, as well as any sort of actions. The two major differences that you may not be super used to are the auth credential and the auth schemes that I added here. So if I go up, as you can see, I have a scheme and a credential, and we'll go into what each of those are and how that information is set. So the OAuth scheme, think of it as an end user authn scheme for your backend service. So for this use case, Salesforce, what I'm able to define is, well, okay, as a part of the three-legged auth, where do I go to generate an auth code? Where can I generate that auth code and take that auth code and generate a token? What's scopes? So basically, what permissions do I want to request as a part of that access, which should match either the end user or the end user application being delegated through that delegated auth framework. So first things first, I have my auth scheme. Next item is I have my auth credentials. So great, I understand where to consume into these services. I need some sort of client identifier and client secret. That's a registered application that's going to allow me to propagate my credentials through the system. So I basically stored those in a secret manager, as you can see here. It's only a couple lines of code to propagate that. If you want to have that elsewhere in an environment file, kind of what have you, totally fine as well. From a security best practice standpoint, I just kind of used secret manager. And then really from there, the only other item is, okay, now that I have a token and I authenticated myself, where do I redirect my user to propagate that token into the ADK framework? So a lot of those variables that you see here, besides the client ID and client secret, are stored in my environment file. So like I mentioned before, here's my agent redirect URL for locally hosted ADK agents. We have documentation for where this will live as a part of Agent Engine. Should you deploy this ADK to Google Cloud's ADK and Agent Engine framework, and Agent Space docs on that as well. This is just a local version of it, like I mentioned before. With that as well, most of this information is available, whether you Google it or in our documentation, as per where are these end user auth URLs, token URLs, and items of that sort for different services. This is Salesforce specific, but like I mentioned before, we've seen examples with ServiceNow and other entities where, again, all you would need to parameterize this information is the pertinent three-legged OAuth information, and the rest should be pretty self-explanatory. You can reuse a lot of this code and a lot of this toolset framework to power that entire order of operations to get the end user auth into the ADK framework and propagate it into your connector and connection development and consuming call. So that is what I wanted to cover today. Thank you.